Thank you for sharing your thoughts on what flow means to you in the chat box in the last exercise. I think if we go back 10 years or more, I don't really recall anyone talking about flow, but now I hear it mentioned pretty much every day. For the most part, it seems people are using flow in the context of unblocking something, and that something is often at the end of the pathway, freeing up beds, delayed transfers of care, TTO medicines. Thinking of flow in that way is not incorrect, but for me it misses much of the point. Let me explain. Let's think of a very long dual carriageway with traffic lights placed every 400 meters. You travel along nicely at first, and then you have to stop at the first red light. You wait there a few minutes before it turns green. You set off, edging your nose in front of the car to your left, and then you see the next light turning red. You grind to a halt, tapping your finger on the steering wheel as you wait the change of light. You hit red light after red light, becoming more and more frustrated. When you do eventually get to your destination, you apologize for being late and tell everyone how you hit every red light. They all give a collective moan because they've all had the same experience. To me, this is what our healthcare system is like almost all of the time. A long road full of traffic lights that spend most of their time on red. You might wait at a red light for weeks before it turns green and you accelerate to your next 20-minute appointment. Then hit another red light, again perhaps stuck there for a number of weeks. It could be months or years before you finally leave the pathway. This is not flow. And whilst we like to spend time and energy turning the last set of lights to green to free things up, like we do with discharges, we miss much of the point. The whole pathway has to flow, start to finish. If we had flow on our dual carriageway, there would be no red lights. They would all be green. We would set a steady, continuous speed of, say, 30 miles per hour and synchronize all the traffic lights so that at that speed, you always hit a green light. There would be no stops and starts, no waits, just a steady and continuous stream of traffic. Our measures would be speed and the required distance between cars, not the size of queues and the lengths of waits. When I lived in Germany back in the 1980s and 1990s, they had such roads and traffic light systems, so this is not a fanciful dream. We can create real flow in healthcare, but it is not about looking at only one part of the pathway, and it is not about working faster or working harder. It is about organizing ourselves and synchronizing what we do to demand, just like we would synchronize traffic lights and speeds to traffic volume. Right, the easy bit. We have 7 flows that we see in healthcare, and these are the things we must understand, organize, and synchronize if we are going to create overall flow. It is actually pretty obvious what they are, and if you have a quick think now, you will probably get most of them. But here goes. First, we have patients. These are the people stuck at the traffic lights, our end customer. But patients come with families, friends, and carers. They will often accompany patients to appointments, visit them in hospital, perhaps support them taking medication or doing rehab. Next, we have staff, and not just clinical staff, but all of our staff who are involved in moving the patient along the pathway, directly or indirectly. We also have equipment, everything from a blood pressure machine to an MRI scanner. And supplies, from catheters to PPE to meals brought to the ward. I also like to split this flow into 2, so we have clean supplies coming in and used or dirty supplies going out. We should keep those flows separate. Then we have medicines, which ultimately is just another supply, but there are so many special rules and safety concerns with medicines that we should consider them separately. And finally, we have information, whether electronic, verbal, or documented. Information is really key because it is often the trigger for something else to happen. If we are going to organize and synchronize all of our different types of flow, then the timing and flow of information is the brains behind it. If information stops flowing, everything stops flowing. Now, two quick tools. The first is a spaghetti chart, and Binoy is going to talk more about this later and get you to do an exercise. I love spaghetti charts because they help bring flow to life. And this is so important because it is actually quite hard to see flow. You really need to track it. This example on the left is the flow of a nurse in our cataract clinic for the morning list. All that motion is waste, and you can measure it, not only in terms of time and distance traveled, but in how exhausted the nurse is at the end of the shift, and in how often they need to resole their shoes. And the one on the right is the flow around a nurse's station over a 15-minute period, with different colors representing different types of flow. We know that some flows need to come together at certain points in time to deliver value, such as a patient, staff, and medicine. And we also know that at other times we want those flows separate and distinct. We don't want our fresh, clean linen mixed in with all the dirty laundry. Spaghetti charts can help us map out those flows accordingly, especially if you are designing or repurposing our estate. A new hospital or the move of a ward or service. Do not do anything until you have understood flow in great detail, and then redesign your space with all these flows in mind. Once it's built, it's often too late to change it. Our second tool is a flow process analysis, and again Binoy is going to talk you through it later on. It is a bit like a swim lane diagram for those of you familiar with those. Basically, we chart down the left-hand column all of the process steps, and for each one we can look at what is happening in that step. It might be an inspection, or a wait, or a walk, or transportation, and we can also identify the types of waste evident at each step. It is a really neat way of not only showing the process and waste within it, but also what we could hope to achieve by eliminating weights and other wastes. We can get a real feel for what a more flowing process might look like. Now finally, and thinking ahead of when you come back for the intermediate course. Do you remember the road example we started with and thinking about flow as turning the traffic lights to green? We said we would need to operate at a steady speed and a set distance between cars. Well, what if we introduced different types of traffic down the same road, from bicycles and farm vehicles to large lorries and buses? In order for all the traffic to flow well, we might need to operate different lanes, perhaps for very slow traffic that could not match our standard speed. But we would not want a lane for every different type of traffic. So perhaps if they had similar attributes, we could group them together and they could all go down one lane. So maybe motorbikes could go in the car lane, or very long vehicles could go down one lane as they would mess up our distancing arrangements. And maybe bicycles would need a lane of their own. It is the same for our patient flows and pathways. We might need different lanes for different groups of patients, avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach, but at the same time creating efficiencies by grouping people with like needs together.